Hello everybody, and welcome to a complete guide on getting the best possible MAAO runs. Playing Risk of Rain 2 on Monsoon with all artifacts on is just about the hardest thing you can put yourself through in the vanilla version of the game. So how is it done? What are the essential pieces of information needed to conquer MAAO? Well, no matter your concerns, item order, survivor loadouts, general gameplay tips, I will be sure to cover it all here in this video. Let's start with a very quick rundown of the survivor loadouts. Now, most of them are actually the same as what you would take in a regular run, with the most notable exceptions being the Artificer and Acrid. On Artificer, taking her jump over the flamethrower is a no-brainer, as your early game damage is not as important as your early mobility. Losing the flamethrower does not matter at all compared to the upside of having an insta retreat button. For Acrid, taking blight over poison will help you immensely, as again, you don't need a ton of damage for reasons you will hear quite a bit in this video, and the benefit of being able to kill things with your passive far outweighs the potential, keyword here potential, of having more damage. Other than those two survivors, simply choose whichever skills you are most comfortable with. If you want in-depth reasonings to the other loadouts, check out the video I have on them here. Let's move on to the general approach to starting a MAAO run. The first stage is the most important to execute on, so there are quite a few things to unpack here. First off, you'll need to know what all of the artifact effects are, obviously, so either read them over a few times in your own game to remember them, or you can check out my video here if you don't know them at all that covers each of their effects in detail. The name of the game in a MAAO run is Do Not Get Hit. Seriously. I know I and many others already adhere to the golden rule of not getting hit, forehead, but it is without doubt the single most important thing in a MAAO run. The Artifact of Glass reduces your HP by 90% and removes your one-shot protection entirely, so if you get hit, you are dead, at least before you get any items. The second most important thing is knowing which items to grab and in which order. If your top priority is not getting hit, then mobility makes sense as being the most important item type to get first, right? Well, actually, Mr. Streamer, if you simply kill everything before they kill you, why would you need to dodge anything? Therefore, the damage items are actually the most important to get. Thank you very much. In the normal runs, yes, that is absolutely the case. Damage over everything. However, here in MAAO land, you don't actually need damage at all for the first 3 stages. This is because you have effectively 10 times your usual damage at all times, due to the glass artifact giving 5 times, and then the artifact of swarms having the HP of each monster. The only caveat is that you have to deal with double the amount of monsters. For a single given monster, you have 10 times the effective damage, which will be more than enough to delete anything in a fraction of a second. So I say again, do not bother grabbing damage items early on. Instead, grab a bit of defense first and then exclusively mobility for at least the first 2 stages. I'll go over exactly which items to grab and when in the next section. I think it goes without saying that in order to not get hit, you need to constantly be moving around, yeah? Well, there's a tiny issue with that in MAAO. Every item that drops for you is instead a little colored cube that you have to walk up to, stand still, and interact with to choose a specific item. If you are having issues looting an item from the command artifact, then you simply need to know exactly what you want to grab before you even get close to the cube. Given enough experience, you'll know where each item is located in the list, given a tiny error margin of maybe a couple spaces. So by making up your mind beforehand, you can preemptively move your cursor to the spot where the item will be and then grab it, which will be much faster overall. The other option is to walk up to the cube, look around for a bit, be like, yeah, repulsion's pretty good here, or wait, maybe a goat hoof, I don't, and I'm dead. Now, some of you may not like what I have to say here next, which is feel free to reset your run as soon as you spawn in if the monster you got on stage 1 is not a good fight. Meaning if you get lesser wisps, vultures, golems, etc., just reset immediately and look for beetles, bison, or imps. Is it cheesing? Kind of. Is it part of the game? Yep. Am I gonna do it? Yep. Should you? Only if you want to. It's not necessary by any means. Every monster on every stage will be the same due to the artifact of kin, and by getting beetles, bison, or imps, the only purely melee enemies in the game, you are making your life significantly easier on stage 1, which is the most important stage in MAAO. I understand if you don't want to reset constantly and you have the urge to duke it out with whatever you got, but I'm going over the best practices here, and resetting is definitely one of them. Do it or don't, but you should do it. The final general tip I have here before we move into the items is to stay away from enemies. On death, enemies will drop a bunch of explodey, spiky balls that, by the way, explode after 3 bounces and are not time-based, so be careful, and spawn a ghost wisp from their corpses. More often than not, the lesser wisps from the Artifact of Soul are actually a non-issue thanks to friendly fire and the explodey spiky balls we just talked about. But for any flying enemies, the vultures, wisps, soulless probes, etc., the ghost wisps can be an issue because the balls won't bounce high enough to kill them. So if your monster is a flying type, keep your distance and remember to kill twice. Once for the actual monster and then the other for the ghost wisp. Alright, let's talk about some items. Before I talk specifics, allow me to briefly go over farming versus rushing, as MAAO runs are much different than normal runs. There have been times where I rush the TP immediately after getting my first few whites and greens, and then there's been times where I farm stage 1 for 12 minutes straight. Both have worked out, and for the context of choosing to farm versus moving on, it will differ from run to run. If you don't get a great stage 1, let's say you got Lemurians as your monster and Engineer as your survivor, not an ideal situation, then you may want to grab only a couple whites and greens and then book it to the TP to get out of there. Whereas if you got Beetles and the Huntress, that's some good loot right there, buddy. Yeehaw! You'll probably just want to stick around as long as you can until you fall asleep. Staying on stage 1 to farm is absolutely a viable strategy, just it's not very engaging. As time goes on, the difficulty and thus reward from the monsters you fight goes up, as you all know, but as this reward goes up, so does their chance to drop an item due to how the artifact of sacrifice works. This means your runs actually only get better the longer you stick around on a stage, which is the polar opposite of what happens in a regular run. So try both of them out, farming versus rushing, and see which one works better for your playstyle. Regardless of which method you choose, the order in which you grab the items does not change. I said mobility is king, which it is. However, for your first few white items, you'll actually want a bit of defense instead. This is because, again, if you get hit by anything, you are instantly dead. But this can be mitigated very quickly. To mitigate, the first white item you'll need is a topaz brooch, because just the single stack will double your entire HP pool. Yes, you only have 10% of the usual amount. Hunter starts stage 1 with 9 HP, by the way. But going from about 20 to about 40 HP will make the difference of dying or living from a random hit, which, make no mistake, you will randomly get hit due to the sheer number of enemies around. So after the single brooch, your next 3 or 4 white items should be repulsion armor plating, as their 5 flat damage reduction will each, again, save you from those stray hits. However, a few repulsions also makes you nigh immortal to rapidly damaging effects such as burns, bleeds, and even titan lasers. So they are most certainly a necessary pick. Don't go overboard on them, and definitely don't take them past the first few stages, because the amount of damage the monsters deal will far outscale the mitigation from the repulsion armor. After your brooch and the repulsions, you'll want the almighty mobility. I opt to grab goat hooves instead of energy drinks on everybody, because there's no guarantee that your next survivor will be able to sprint and attack at all times. So I simply value the consistency of the hooves higher. I get anywhere from 5 to 10, just get however many you need to feel comfortable dodging stuff. For the green items, the first 2 I get are a wax quill and a hopu feather. Now, which one you get first depends on who you're playing. Someone like Huntress, who is always sprinting, would want the wax quill first, whereas someone like Multi or Commando would want the feather. Regardless of which one you get first, take the other as your second. In fact, I usually take 2 or 3 stacks of both before I even think of getting another green item, because the mobility quails and feathers provide is just that important to have early on. Going back to the white items, if you decided to stay on stage 1 to farm for a bit, then every other white item you get after the hooves should be crit glasses. It's nice to double all of your damage when you're already dealing 10 times the usual amount, and capping your crit will allow you to continue steamrolling things regardless of the difficulty scaling up. If you are lucky enough to get a red item, then without a doubt, grab ceremonial daggers. Literally just a single stack of daggers will play the game for you. Any and everything will be dead on arrival so long as you have some daggers lingering around. Nothing even comes close to the ceremonial dagger's power, period. Remember, you have 10 times the damage. In fact, they are so good for MAAO runs that if you want, you can buy a blue portal on stage 1 with the lunar coin, farm until you have enough greens to trade in at the bazaar for the red, and then grab yourself some guaranteed early daggers. You will not regret it, I promise. And you know what? Since you're already here in the bazaar, you may as well buy some lunar items. Be careful not to buy the equipment instead of the item, and then turn those bad boys into some shaped glass. I mean, hey, you're already dead in 1 hit anyway, why not take that 10 times damage up to 20 times instead? Or even 40 times, heck, even 80 times, who cares? Hopefully you can sense my tone here, but thing is, I actually am being serious. Again, I'm giving you the best tips I can here in this guide, and getting a blue portal off of stage 1 and grabbing ceremonial daggers plus some shaped glass is the way to get a MAAO god run, period. You can actually scale the daggers even further with some crowbars, as they're almost guaranteed to one-shot anything with a couple shaped glass, and on top of that, the crowbars just keep those one-shots going for even longer. Now, regardless of whether or not you have your first red item, the next items you should get are a few ukuleles, an ice band, a fire band, and then some ATGs. The emphasis should be on the ATGs, as they will scale your damage up the highest, but you do need the others for the proc chains. So long as you have one of each item that can occur in the proc chain, you're good to go. Now, I could keep rambling on about the specifics of each item and the reasons to take one over the other and when you should do so and blah blah blah, but instead, now I'll just tell you what not to take in a MAAO run. First, due to the artifact of chaos's friendly fire, fire, do not take gasoline or will-o'-the-wisps. Their AoE upon getting just a few stacks gets quite big, and you will eventually make the mistake of getting a tad bit too close to an enemy when they die, and as soon as you do, you're following them wherever they're going. You may be wondering why the wisps and gasoline are dangerous, but the daggers are not, and that's because the friendly fire only affects things that don't specifically target something. Ukuleles, daggers, engineers' turrets, etc. each require a target to occur, so the only way you can die to them is if you are in their line of fire, whereas the gasoline and will-o'-the-wisp simply require something to die and then boom, they go off no matter what. So don't take gas or wisps, you have been warned. There are also some other dangerous items that you should avoid, but unlike the gas and the wisps, you can play around these ones, although I would strongly recommend just avoiding these ones too. Fireworks, head stomper, and happiest mask. Fireworks are only really an issue if whatever you're interacting with is close to the ceiling, or rather the ceiling is close to it. The best example I can give is the legendary chest on Abyssal Depths, which yes, it does still spawn with sacrifice on, because that thing is right under the ceiling. If you open the chest and have fireworks, you will instantly die. Head stomper is a bit funny. The AoE of the ground pound actually does damage you, so if you want to grab it for the momentum and immunity to fall damage, go ahead, and actually later on the fall damage immunity does become important, so it's not a terrible idea, but I'd still avoid it. And finally, the happiest mask is happy, of course, but once you get 15 Elder Lemurians as ghosts and one of them takes damage from a stray shot of yours, it won't be too happy anymore. Other than that, the item should be taken at your own discretion based on a normal run, although it's a normal run with Artifact of Command, so you can definitely prioritize one or two items over everything else if you wanted to. More ATGs. There are some exceptions to the normal rankings of items. For example, I tend to avoid teddy bears due to them making your doppelganger fight turn into an absolute slog, but hey, they're still teddy bears, so if you want some block chance, take them. And the final thing I will cover here with the items is the AFK combo, which is at least one ceremonial dagger, one brain stalks, and one strides of heresy. Because every enemy is an elite, you will essentially have perma uptime brain stalks due to the daggers one-shotting everything, and with that perma uptime brain stalks, you, by extension, get perma uptime strides of heresy, which is kinda busted. There is a small 0.5 second window that you can still die in if you mistime your strides, but other than that, the strides, brain stalks, and daggers equals a free run. You can actually even take this combo higher by grabbing a Visions of Heresy, which will enable you to, regardless of which survivor you're playing, just hold left click while facing the first enemy you see and watch them explode and start the big chain reaction perma uptime shenanigans. Again though, I could keep going on and on with the most optimal items to go for in every situation with every piece of context, but there's really no point. Just get a brooch and some repulsions early on, get some quails, feathers, and hooves after, then cap your crit and focus on proc chains. That's all there is to it. However, and this is with all things, personal experience will carry you the furthest and improve you the most, so be sure to keep trying if you can't quite get a god run right away. Also, don't get discouraged. This is literally the hardest thing you can do in the vanilla version of Risk of Rain 2 at the moment. It ain't supposed to be easy. And that does it for my MAAO guide. Do you have any questions? Found the info helpful? Do you want to tell me how the Interstellar Death Plant is OP on MAAO because there's like 500 billion monsters around? Let me know with a like or dislike on the video and a comment below. You can check out my stream at twitch.tv/WoolieGaming and consider joining our Discord server as well. Thank you for watching.